Hi everyone and welcome back to another lab. In this lab, we are going to configure a wireless LAN access point using the Graphical User Interface, which is the GUI. And the purpose of this lab is to provide a practical understanding of how to set up and manage a wireless network, ensuring secure and efficient connectivity for wireless clients. We will cover the basics of wireless LAN configuration, including SSID setup, security settings, and IP addressing. Regarding the lab topology, we have a router that acts as the ISP router, which is router 1, and router 1 will mimic a server that can be set up on the internet, which we will configure loopback 0 with 203.0.113.25/32. This router is then connected to the wireless access point via gig Ethernet 000, and the access point is connected to router 1 via the internet port. We will have a couple of SSIDs that we are going to configure. So the SSID IEE is for users who work for the company, while the guest SSID is for the guests or visitors who require internet access. And the objective of this lab is to show you how we can use the GUI on the access point to perform some basic configuration to allow connectivity between end users and the internet. So regarding the lab tasks, we are going to perform some basic configurations on router 1, where we are going to configure interface gig Ethernet 0/0/0, where we are going to enable the interface and set a description and assign an IP address from the lab table. We then are going to create a local account and use the appropriate commands to enable Telnet. We will then configure loopback 0 to mimic a server from the internet. And then finally, we will perform some post checks to verify our configuration. Next, we move to step number 2, where we are going to jump into the GUI of the access point and configure the internet port and the LAN port. We will then create a couple of SSIDs. These will be one for the staff that work for IEE, and the other one will be for our visitors. We will then disable any frequency band that are not used, and then we will set some attributes under the security settings. Next, we will go through the end host configuration, where we are going to assign the appropriate SSID for each device with the appropriate credentials. Then we will verify our settings, make sure that every device has a unique IPv4 address and has received an IP address from the DHCP server. And then we are going to move to step number 4, where we are going to perform some connectivity tests. We will ping from each end host in the IEE network to the default gateway. Then we will ping the server that is from the internet. And then after that, we will show you that laptop 1 should be able to ping phone 1. However, laptop 2 or phone 2 will not be able to ping any device in the network, and it will only have access to the internet. We will then initiate a telnet session from laptop 1 and phone 1 to router 1, and then use a web browser application to access the access point GUI and manage it remotely. Then we will do some access policy change on the access point, where we are going to block phone 1 from being able to telnet and browse to the access point and router 1. And then after this, we are going to test the policy that we have created by initiating a HTTP session from phone 1 to the access point GUI and check if that session established or not. And then we're going to move to step number 8, where we are going to initiate a telnet and HTTP session from laptop 1, and just to make sure that laptop 1 still have access to those devices. And then once we've done that, we're going to move to step number 9, where we are going to configure very basic quality of service for laptop 1 traffic. And then finally, we will save our configuration, and that would be the end of the lab. Okay, this is the moment where I ask you to pause the video and give this a go yourself to test your knowledge and skills. So I added the lab document in the video description so that you can download it and practice at your own pace. I have also included a couple of packet tracer labs for you to download. You will find a pre and a post version of the lab. And the pre-lab is for those who wants the lab ready to go and tackle all tasks. And the post lab is for those who wants the full lab solution. Okay, so I'm gonna jump into the first task of the lab, which I'm gonna jump into router 1. So I'm gonna go to router 1 CLI. And then I'll go to global config. And then from there, I will issue the interface gig ethernet 0/0/0. I will include a description. So I'm gonna say, this is a link for access point 1. I'm going to set the IPv4 address. I'm going to say 10.0.0.1, and there's going to be /30. So it's going to be 255.255.255.252. And then I'm going to enable the interface. So I'm going to say no shutdown. And then after that, we can move to the next task where we are requested or required to create a local account named IEE with a secret password of IEE as well, all capital case. And we also need to configure that account with the highest privilege level. So we're going to say username IEE privilege 15. And we're going to include the word secret and then IEEs. Now that we've done this, let's move into the next task where we would need to issue the appropriate commands to enable Telnet. So I'm going to say line VTY 0 all the way to 4. And then from here, I'm going to issue the logging synchronous command, login local, and transport input telnet. Next, let's configure the loopback interface at 0. So I'm going to go back to global config, and I'm going to say interface loopback 0. And I will set the IPv4 address. So that's going to be 203.0.113.25/32. And then now we can perform some in-flight checks. So I can issue the show IP interface brief, and you can see that we have configured gig ethernet 000 with 10.0.0.1. And right now the current status is in the up state. So the physical layer and data link layer are in the up state, which is good. Loopback 0 is also configured with the appropriate IPv4 address. And let's verify that we have configured the user account. So I'm going to say show running -config pipe include username. And you can see that we have created a user account called IEE. And the password is encrypted because we used the secret command. And you can see that the privilege is 15. Which means when we log into the router using that account, it goes directly into user privilege mode. So now that we have performed some in-flight checks, we can then go ahead and just save the configuration just in case anyway. And then I'm going to minimize that. And then I'm going to jump into the access point stencil. And then I'm going to go to the GUI. Maximize this, and I'm going to tackle the first task where we would need to configure the internet interface that is pointing to router 1. And as you can see here, the default page, when you land into the GUI, you will find yourself under the setup page, and under the internet setup, we should be able to select the internet connection type. So I'm actually going to set that to static. And then from here, we will be able to enter the IPv4 address information manually. So here I'm going to say 10.0.0.2. And then the subnet mask is going to be 255.255.255.252. And then the default gateway is going to be 10.0.0.1. And then I'm going to just put the DNS as the Google DNS, which is 8.8.8.8. Now that you've done that, it is very important to hit the Save Settings button. And now this is done. Next, let's move into the next task where we need to configure the LAN network. So I'm going to go a little bit down, and you can see here under this, we are required to change the IP address from 192 to 172.16.0.1. We will make sure that the DHCP server is checked under the enabled radius button. So that is good. And then here it says that starts IP address from 192.168.0.100. This is obviously wrong. So we just need to save settings, and then you can see that this has changed. And based on the requirements, we would need to actually start assigning IP address from the DHCP server from 172.16.0.100. And we are requested or required to set the maximum number of users to 150. And then as part of that information that will be leased by the DHCP server, we also need to make sure that the DNS also is being populated. So I'm going to configure the DNS manually. So I'm going to say 8.8.8.8. And then I'm going to hit Save Settings. Now that we've done that, we can then move to the next task where we are requested or required to perform some basic wireless settings. So I'm going to go up. And then from here, you can see that the second option from the top menu, which is called wireless, if you click on it, you will then find the basic wireless settings. And here we are going to disable the frequency band that we are not going to use. So I'm going to disable this, and I'm going to disable that as well. And then under the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band, we are going to create a SSID with IEE, and we're going to make sure that this has been enabled, and we're going to leave the settings as is for now. And just to let you know, guys, the SSID is a service set identifier, and that is a unique identifier that names a wireless local area network, or WLAN, when you set up an access point, and the SSID is used to distinguish your network from others in the area. This name is broadcasted by the access point so that wireless devices can detect and connect to it. So we are going then to move to the next task where we are required to do further configurations under the wireless security settings. So we would need to click on the wireless security settings tab. So I'm going to click on that. And from here, we will need to enable the 2.4 frequency band. So I'm going to enable this, and I'm going to say this is going to be WPA2 Personal. And WPA2 Personal stands for Wi-Fi Protected Access to Personal. And it is a security protocol used to protect wireless networks. And it uses a pre-shared key, or PSK, for authentication, which means that each device connected to the network must use the same password or passphrase. And WPA2 Personal provides robust encryption using the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES, ensuring that data transmitted over the wireless network is secure from unauthorized access. This protocol is commonly used in home and small business networks for its balance of strong security and ease of use. So we are going to use the encryption type as mentioned earlier, the Advanced Encryption Standard. So we're going to leave that option by default. And then we are going to set the passphrase to IEE 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And once we've done that, we can then go ahead and save the settings. Okay, so once we've done that, we then can move to the next step where we are requested to create a guest network. So I'm going to go to the guest network here, and I'm going to enable or checkbox the enable guest profile. So I'm going to enable that. And in here, I'm going to call this SSID, change the default to guest. And you can see that broadcast SSID is checked by default. If it's not in your case, you would need to check that. And then the security mode, again, we would need to enable this with the WPA2 Personal. So we're going to choose this. Again, we're going to choose the same encryption method. And the passphrase this time is going to be GIST 123456. Once you've done that, you would need to hit Save Settings. And then step number 2 is complete from the lab task. We will then need to move to step number 3, where we are going to tackle the end devices. So I will minimize this and I will go to laptop 1, for example. And then if I go to config and then wireless under the interface option, you will be able to change the SSID from the default to IEE. And then under the authentication, we need to change that to WPA2 PSK. And then for the PSK passphrase, we would need to set that with IEE 123456. And then just give it some time, and we're hoping to receive an IP address by DHCP, and you can see that we have received 172.168.0.101/24. So that's the first end device that we've configured. So I'm going to minimize this, and then I'm going to jump into phone 1 and repeat the same thing. So I'll go to config and then wireless 0 for the interface, and then I will get the SSID configured with IEE. I will select the WPA2-PSK, and then I will set the passphrase to IEE 123456, and then just wait a few seconds. And now we can see that the IPv4 address has been populated accordingly. So I'm going to minimize that. And then let's move into phone 2. Go to config and then wireless 0. And then here we would need to change from default to guest network. Select the WPA2 PSK, and then you would need to set the password, which is GIST123456. Again, wait a few seconds until the IPv4 address gets populated here. And you can see that this has been populated already. So I'm going to minimize that. And then finally, do the same thing on laptop 2. And now we have received 172.16.0.103 for laptop 2. Next, let's just do some verification and in-flight checks. So I will go back to laptop 1, and then I'm going to choose desktop. And from here, I will just go to the command prompt. And here you can issue the ipconfig /all. And under the wireless interface, you can see that we have received the DNS server IPv4 address. We have received the DHCP server, which is 172.16.0.1, which is the default gateway as well. And the IPv4 address assignment to laptop 1 is 172.16.0.101. Let's initiate a ping to the default gateway while we're at it. So we're going to say ping 172.16.0.1, and we have successful ping. Let's repeat the same thing for phone 1. So you can see the information is populated under the wireless 0 interface, and the current IPv4 address has been assigned to phone 1 is 172.16.0.106. So let's try to ping the default gateway. And we have successful ping as well. So we can see that phone 2 is unable to ping the default gateway, and that's for security reasons, since phone 2 is part of the guest SSID or the guest network. However, if I try to access the internet, i.e., trying to ping the IP address on router 1 or the loopback interface on router 1, we should be able to access that network. So let's try that. So I'm going to say ping 10.0.0.1. And you can see that we've managed to ping router 1, which is the ISP, let's say. And if we also wanted to ping the server, which is hypothetically in the internet, we can say ping 203.0.113.25. And you can see that we have successful ping. Next, we're going to do the same thing for laptop 2. So here I'm gonna say ping, or actually before I issue the ping command, let's just reveal the IPv4 address, and let's try to ping the default gateway, even though I know it's not gonna work, but just let's prove the point. And you can see that we can't ping the default gateway. So let's ping the loopback interface 0 on router 1, 203.0.113.25. And you can see that we have access to the internet. Next, I'm going to go back to laptop 1 and phone 1 and repeat the same test to make sure that they are able to reach the internet. So I'm going to copy this command. And then I'm going to select laptop 1 and paste that command in here. And you can see that we are able to ping that server. And let's do the same command for phone 1 as well. And you can see that we have managed to ping the interface loopback 0 on router 1. Next, we are going to jump back into laptop 1 and try to initiate a telnet session from laptop 1 to router 1. And let's do that. So we're going to go back to laptop 1 and we're going to close this application. And then you can find here an application called telnet/SSH client. So if you click on it, and then under the connection type, if you select the telnet option, and then in here, you should be able to put the IP address of router 1, which is going to be 10.0.0.1, and then issue the connect button. And in here, you should be able to put the user account credentials, and you can see that we've logged in router 1 from laptop 1. If I issue the command called show users, you can see that I've logged into the router 1 via the VTY0, and the location is coming from access point 1. So let's do the same thing, but this time we're going to do it from phone 1. So I will go to Telnet SSH client application, and then select Telnet, and then set the IPv4 address, and then hit the connect button. And here we're going to say IEE with the same password, IEE. And you can see that we have logged into the router 1 as well. So if I issue show users, we should be able to have 2 sessions. So you can see the first session is VTY0 and the second session is VTY1. Now let's move into the next test where we are requested to initiate another HTTP session from laptop 1 and phone 1. So I'm going to close this. And then go to the web browser application. And in here, type under the URL http ://10.0.0.2 and then hit enter. And then it will ask for authorization. So the user name is admin and the password is IEE, all capital case. And you can see that we have access to the GUI. We can manage the access point from phone 1. Let's do the same thing quickly on laptop 1 as well. So go to web browser. And then in here, we're going to put http ://10.0.0.2. Hit enter. And then again, set the credentials. And you can see that we have access to the GUI on the access point 1. Next, we are going to jump into step number 5, where we are going to configure an access policy on access point 1, where we are going to block Telnet from phone 1 to router 1. And also we are going to block HTTP and HTTPS to prevent phone 1 from being able to manage or try to access access point 1 via the GUI. So I'm going to go back to access point 1. And from here, we can go to access restriction. And I'm going to create a new policy and I'm going to call it block_telnet. First of all, I'm going to enable this. And then I'm going to edit the list. And we actually do need the IPv4 address for phone 1. So I would need to go back to phone 1. Actually, I would need to cancel that first, close this. And then go to phone 1. And then go to the command prompt and try to fetch the IPv4 address. That's 106, as you can see on the screen. So I'll go back to access point 1 and edit the list again. And in here, I'm going to say 106. And you need to save the settings first and then close. And then under the blocked applications, we need to add HTTP. We also need to add HTTPS as per requested by the lab. We're also going to add the Telnet. So once you added these 3 applications or protocols, we can then go ahead and hit Save Settings. So now that we've done that, we can then go back to phone 1 and check if we are able to Telnet to the router and also HTTP to the access point GUI or not. Okay, so I'm going to go back to phone 1. So I'm just going to close this. And I'm going to close that. Then I'm going to go to phone 1, close this, go to the Telnet first, and hit the 10.0.0.2, sorry, .1 actually, and then try to connect. And the connection should time out. And you can see here the current session has closed. Do you want to reestablish a new session with the previous session options? I would say no. Right, let's do the same test for web browser. So let's try to HTTP to the access point. So now let's put the HTTP ://10.0.0.2, hit enter. And as you can see that the request has timed out. Let's do the same thing quickly on laptop 1. So I'm going to go back to laptop 1 and go to web browser. And in here we can see that we are able to put the credentials and we have access to access point 1. If I cancel this and then go back to the Telnet SSH client and then try to Telnet back to the router, and then click on the connect button, you can see that we are able to log in to the CLI of router 1. Okay, next we are going to tackle step number 9, where we are going to configure basic quality of service settings on access point 1. But before we do that, we would need to retrieve the MAC address for laptop 1. So I'm going to go back to the command prompt. So I'm going to close the SSH or the Telnet session. And then I'm going to go back to command prompt. And from there, I should be able to get the physical address or the MAC address for wireless 0. And then go back to my access point. And then if we go to applications and gaming option, and you will find that we have a small menu. If you click on the QoS, which is the last option, and then we would need to enable this under the quality of service settings or tab. And here we would need to paste the MAC address. And then we need to set the priority from low to high. That means laptop 1 will have a higher priority for its traffic in comparison to the rest of the devices in the network. And once you've done that, we can then go ahead and save our settings. And we have reached the end of the lab. So that's it, folks, for this video. If you found this video helpful, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and turn notifications so you never miss our future tutorials and tech insights. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to drop a comment below. I read all your comments and I'm here to assist you. Remember, consistency and hands-on practice are key to success. So stay curious, stay inspired, and until next time, peace.